What's going on? Welcome into the podcast. PHNX Cardinals, Brack, Howard Balzer, the legendary NFL scribe, joins the show, filling in for Johnny Venerable as he makes his move out of the Copa and back to civilization. Excited about that, but more excited to talk to you fine folks today. Talk some Arizona Cardinals football. Howard, how we doing, my man?
I'm doing well. Enjoying a little somewhat downtime at this time of the year, but you start looking at that calendar and all of a sudden it happens every year. Man, looking forward to some time where there's not a lot going on. And before we know it, it'll be the middle of July and we'll be saying training camp starting in 2 weeks.
Yeah, so, it's unreal. You're like, what can we talk about, especially on a daily show? And you're never short on topics and content as far as the NFL goes. But, you've got about a 6-week stretch during the entire year, during 52 weeks during the year, where it's just like 6 weeks where you don't have anything going on. And then next thing you know, you're in the grind and it's nonstop through the playoffs and into the Super Bowl. And then you got the offseason, NFL draft season. So this is the one dead period. So there's a couple of things that, you start thinking about looking forward to the season. And Howard, when we start to look forward to this Arizona Cardinals season, Kyler Murray, of course, coming off the knee injury, having surgery January 3rd, the rehab, it continues to kind of take a couple headlines here and there throughout this offseason. What are the biggest challenges Kyler Murray is facing coming off his first major injury of his career? You've noted several times that Kyler has had several injuries before, but none of this significant. So we'll get into that. Plus, you have some contract solutions. You've got part of your expertise is deep diving some of these contracts and looking at some potential solutions between the Cards and their star safety. So we'll get into that. But first and foremost, want to thank everybody for joining us. Mr. J, I see you. Let's go, boys. Fishbowl Flash, thanks for joining us as you do every day. Thank you for today, Howard. Absolutely. Always thankful and grateful when we get a guy like Howard on the show. Make sure if you're listening, you subscribe to the podcast, leave it a 5-star rating and a review as well, and like and subscribe to this channel on YouTube. Howard, what are your first thoughts of when you think about Kyler Murray and the challenges that the star quarterback is going to face coming back from knee surgery?
There's so many challenges, and there's no shortage of them, probably is the best way of looking at it. And while they're all important, whether you talk about rust when he comes back and getting back into rhythm and all those things, the biggest challenge that I see from this with the timing of everything is when will he be able to practice? And that doesn't sound like a big thing, but it should be. I mean, Colt McCoy talked about it a few weeks ago when he was saying how important all this time in the OTAs and minicamp was for him and the receivers and the running backs, offensive line, and everybody to be getting on the same page and make some of those mistakes that you make in a new system in practice and the preseason. So hopefully you don't repeat them and you're able to get into a rhythm. So my biggest question, I don't know if it's fair, Bo, to call it a challenge, but it's a question. When will he be able to actually get on the field and practice? And I'm very curious about how the Rams will treat his roster status when training camp begins. And let's remember, this is, what was it? I think it's 5 weeks from tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
The Cardinals veterans report. And so my biggest question is, will the Cardinals put him on physically unable to perform, or will they not do that so that little by little he will be able to do some things on the field during training camp, even if they're not big time things? Because if you're on that physically unable to perform list, you're not allowed to practice at all. Now, you can come off it anytime during the preseason, but if you go on it when on the reserve list when the season starts, not only can't you play until after 4 games, but you can't even practice for that period of time. So I don't know how the Cardinals navigate that in terms of how they get him enough reps in practice, understanding the offense, going through things, working with new receivers, and how much time are they going to be able to give him before they say, okay, he's ready to play?
Yeah.
Because if he's on that reserve list and he doesn't start practicing till after the season starts, well, there's not a whole lot of reps in practice during the season. You're getting your quarterback ready for the game that week. So to me, that's the biggest question, is getting him comfortable and really mentally and physically comfortable with this system. After that, yeah, there'll be the usual stuff. There'll be some rust. There'll be some issues with new players and all those things. But like I said, to me, that's the biggest question, is how do you get him prepared for that time when he's going to start playing again and going into a game?
Yeah, I mean, with the regime change, the moves in the front office, obviously the coaching staff, that plays a major role in this, learning a new system. And I think, as far as to a lot of your points you made, that could be the biggest challenge for Kyler Murray. But then also you take into account that this is a guy that wasn't playing his best football in 2022 when he went down with the knee injury. I mean, this is not him trying to pick up where he left off. Cliff Kingsbury's kind of air raid system, or his take on the air raid, in a system that Kyler Murray's pretty much played in since his freshman year in high school. He's taking on, and he's going to learn a brand new system that, I found interesting. I was listening to Colt McCoy. He joined Chris Long on his podcast, the Green Light Podcast, and he was talking about this system. And Colt McCoy was saying that he's doing things that even in his 20-year NFL career, he's never done before. Like, Colt McCoy sat there and talked to Chris Long, and this was something I'd picked up with when learning about Drew Petzing and what, he did along with the quarterbacks in Cleveland last year, and, what we could pretty much see him try to take with him from Cleveland to Arizona. And it was working with Deshaun Watson as far as his footwork. And that kind of, I was intrigued by that, because Kyler Murray has been a guy that's been pretty comfortable just standing back there in the shotgun, and him getting under center and then dropping back, taking, 3, 5, 7 step drops is not something that he's accustomed to. And I'm curious to see if that's something that's going to present a challenge in itself going forward.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. And we've heard a lot throughout this off-season program about how there seems to be this emphasis on running the football. And we heard Will Hernandez talked about it. James Conner talked about it. That definitely seems something that they want to be able to do, which is fine. I mean, that's a great goal to have. But the reality is, you're not going to be able to run the ball effectively, A, unless you have a really good put together offensive line, but B, are able to pass the ball. Because if you're not functional in the passing game and have some threats there, then a defense is just going to come up and say, okay, they're going to try to run. We'll just stack the box and let them prove that they can throw the ball on our defense. So all of those things enter into it. And I know on the surface, Bo, when we talk about learning an offense, that was a great point that Colt made, because you can have it right in your mind. You can learn the calls. And hey, we heard Clayton Tune, the rookie, talking about how he's coming along and starting to feel comfortable with it. But there's a difference between knowing it in your head and then carrying it out on the field and knowing where receivers are going to be, have the trust that they're going to be where they should be, and working with those receivers. Oh, what do they like? Where do they like the ball? All those different things doesn't just happen by osmosis. You have to work on that, and you have to practice it. And so that, to me, is the biggest question. I thought it was pretty funny when Colt talked to us. He went through a lot of those things. He didn't mention what you said, whether he mentioned the Chris Long, but he did say how important it was to be going through all this. And then when someone asked him about Kyler and that aspect of it, he said, well, I mean, he's been around. He's been playing football for a long time. So it was like he didn't want to come out and say, yeah, it's going to be a tough challenge for him. He didn't want to say that, precisely and publicly. But I don't think it takes a brain surgeon to realize that that is going to be a work in progress whenever he gets out on the field. And even if you have 3 weeks of practice or a month of practice, that's not the same as a game. So you still have to have those game reps for it to occur. And you mentioned Deshaun Watson with Cleveland last year. We saw the rust that he had when he finally got on the field for the Browns, and that was a different situation. He wasn't come back from an injury.
Yeah,
he played in a longer time than Kyler will have. But then there's also the stuff in your mind. Will Kyler? Another challenge is, will he feel that totally comfortable to use his legs, like we all know is a big part of his game, and what makes him so dangerous. He has to have in his mind that I can't worry about my knee. I can't worry about it anymore. I've just got to go out there and play football. And so that's a hurdle that he has to overcome also.
Yeah. So this is Colt McCoy. He joined Chris Long on the Greenlight podcast, and he was talking about the challenges that he's even going through learning Drew Petzing's offense and the footwork that's involved in it.
Like, I had a conversation with him today, like, hey, like, here's one of the footwork things they're asking us to do that, like, has been hard for me, right? I've been doing it one way for almost 20 years. And now we're flipping our feet and, like, trying to play it a little bit different. I was like, whenever you get out on the field, like, you need to call me, because this is probably the most different thing that we're doing than what we're used to. That's going to be hard to, like, understand.
So you hear Colt McCoy say that, and it sounds pretty simple, right? They'll just tell you, hey, obviously this is how you want to pivot, this is how you want to drop, just normal footwork stuff. But Drew Petzing, when he talked about it last year in the challenges, he was asked about the Deshaun Watson was facing. This was what Petzing had to say to kind of get more context about what he means when they're working on footwork.
Again, a lot of it is just tying it to the concepts as much as anything, but certainly there's always an adjustment when you come into a new system in terms of what we're going to ask him from a footwork standpoint of saying, hey, we're going to put this foot forward, we want you to hit in this rhythm, we want to take these hitches, we want to make sure you're moving on your progression when you're at this place in the footwork. And I think there's always going to be some things that we're going to teach differently in that regard.
It's really fascinating, and it's something that I know Cleveland, their media, once they kind of found out about it, was a storyline that they continued to kind of follow up on with Petzing, with Watson, and you would see it evolve from a week-to-week basis. And it's something that I think can't be, it shouldn't be overlooked because of Kyler Murray and the type of offense that he's played in. I mean, he's a guy that's been standing back in the shotgun for so long. So to just say, hey, get under center, take the ball from the center's hands, and then drop back 5 to 7 steps, and then go through your progressions. Like, it's not that freaking simple. It's actually really challenging. And also to throw in the wrinkle that, like, hey, Drew Petzing, Jonathan Gannon, everybody involved wants you to kind of do this in a specific manner and find it in a specific rhythm and concept. I mean, it sounds like it's going to be a big part of this process. And I think you can throw it in there with a lot of the challenges that Kyler Murray and now Colt McCoy are going to face in running this offense for the first time.
Yeah, no question. And it probably is, when you look at it that way, from that precise a standpoint, it probably is the biggest challenge. And then it plays into what we talked about earlier in terms of the time that he has. I mean, it's one thing that the coaches say, this is what we want it. This is the way we want it. And you understand it as a player, right? But it's just not automatic that you start doing it. You need those reps. That's why you have practice. You need that practice so where you're not thinking about it. I mean, how many times do we hear whoever the player is, that you want them out there on the field not having to think about what they're supposed to do, because when you have to think about it, you can't play fast. You has to get to that point where it's just automatic. You're just doing the things you were coached, and you just go out there and do them without thinking. And that just doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, it takes practice, and it takes those reps. And that's why one of the first things I posed, how the Cardinals are going to handle this. That if they feel when training camp begins, and so we're basically we'll call it January 3rd, August 3rd is what? That's 8 months. So you're pretty close to when a guy should be able to be doing some things. And so that's why I do wonder if they'll say, hey, we can't afford to put him on physically unable to perform. Even if he's just out there in practice working on footwork and doing those things on the field and doing this and doing that, even if it's not at a high rate of speed, at least he's starting, you hope, to get comfortable with all these things. And so in a normal situation, a guy, if it was if it was still the same coaching staff and he knew the offense and all that, well, you could wait a couple of weeks probably. So, you're not losing any time. But every day he misses is a day you can't get back. And so I think, that'll be very, very intriguing to see what they do. Because the other point is, when you're on the field, you're not on physically unable to perform. That means you passed your physical, right?
Yeah.
You can't then go on physically unable to perform after that. If all of a sudden something happens and he has a setback or something happens with the knee, then you don't have an option there except at some point perhaps, to put him on injured reserve where he have to miss 3 games, and he can't practice then either. So This is a fine line, I think, that the Cardinals are walking with, kind of a tightrope in effect, to decide how they're going to do this to be able for him to get some work that will not hopefully be detrimental to his physical situation.
It's interesting. Like, it's not like it's unprecedented. We've seen players come back even at the quarterback position in similar timelines. I think Joe Burrow maybe was about just a couple weeks before Kyler Murray would have gotten injured in his season that he had the knee injury, but also not as mobile of a guy. Carson Wentz's timeline matches up almost exactly the same with Kyler Murray's, but Joe Burrow was cleared and did not start training camp on the PUP. I'd have to look back to see, what Wentz's situation. He came back after 3 weeks, the follow-up year to the Eagles Super Bowl run, and it was back in the starting lineup. So be interesting to see. We've heard from Jonathan Gannon on several occasions say Kyler Murray has to check 2 boxes. One, he has to be physically 100%, and then the next box is he has to be 100% mentally because of the impact, an injury, a non-contact injury, a move that he's made thousands of times on the football field before, and it's the same move that he made to injure his knee. Is he going to be able to kind of get it together between the ears? Everybody killing it in the chat. Agent 47 saying K1 needs to prove he's a great leader inside and outside of the field, and he needs to avoid the Cards to get the first pick next year. Absolutely. And then we got Han Shot First saying, I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of pressure taken off Kyler, being a ground and pound team moving forward. Sure, getting under center, handing the ball off to James Conner, whoever might be in the backfield, the running back position for the Arizona Cardinals. And then Jose, to our points, precisely what he's been talking about. Timing is everything along with football technique. This game isn't as easy as people think. Absolutely, it's not. But, there's 3 things here. Kyler Murray, obviously, learning the new offensive system and everything that goes with that, like the footwork with, the rhythm, the timing. And then there's knocking the rust off that you're going to have naturally coming back from a serious injury and then getting back on track, getting back on that star player trajectory that he once was on that was kind of stunted in the 2022 season when the Arizona Cardinals, for whatever reason, just couldn't get on the same page, and it led to them hitting kind of the reset button on this franchise. But I want to get into the other star on the other side of the football with the Arizona Cardinals and Budda Baker, because Howard Balzer has some interesting insight and some potential solutions for the Arizona Cardinals and their star safety Budda Baker that they could come to here. But first, I want to tell you, of course, about what we got going on with our friends over at Pens and Aces. I got the Pens and Aces hoodie. I got the golf polos. Pens and Aces is quickly invading my closet space these days, and rightfully so, because it's legit golf gear for everybody out there, and you can save 15%, 15% off your first order. Pens and Aces is the official golf apparel partner of PHNX and ALLCITY. Of course, check out the Big Drive Energy podcast wherever you find podcasts. But we love our Pens and Aces gear. Go to the website, check out pensandaces.com, and see all the great gear from polos, hats, golf bags, favorite beer sleeve that can actually store 7 beers inside your golf bag to keep drinks cold the entire round. Check out Pens and Aces. Save some money while doing so. 15% off with the code PHNX when you go to pensandaces.com. Also, another code that you want to use, PHNX, when you sign up and you get in on BetMGM. They've got the 3-ball challenge, and you want to sign up with the code PHNX. This is stuff that golfers' dreams are made of. You and 3 guests could be teeing off in one of the most legendary courses as far as top of the ranks for the PGA 3-ball challenge. Take your swings at the free-to-play challenge by revealing your roster of golfers for each week's tournament. Players with the best performing golfers will snag awesome weekly prizes and also be entered to win a shot to win an end-of-the-season grand prize for foursome at the TPC Sawgrass $3,000 in withdrawable bonus dollars can be used to travel, accommodations, food, and beverages. Only way to win is to do it through BetMGM and using that promo code PHNX. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use that code PHNX for a few different offers depending on where you live. But for our AZ audience, you can get up $100 in bonus bets for your first wager with BetMGM. Use that bonus code PHNX. Check out the show notes for the full details. And now listen to our guy Shane talk about it in the disclaimer.
Disclaimer, 21 plus to wager. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. U.S. promotional offers not available in Washington, D.C., Mississippi, Nevada, New York, and Ontario. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Colorado, D.C., Illinois, Indiana, Louisiana, Maryland, Mississippi, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Wyoming. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369, New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP, Arizona. 1-800-522-4700, Kansas, Nevada. 1-800-327-5050, Massachusetts. 1-800-BETS-OFF, Iowa. 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help, Michigan.
So Budda Baker was at minicamp on the sidelines, no shoes, shoeless Budda Baker was taking practice, hanging out with his teammates, his coaches, but he wasn't participating in practice. So the saga kind of drags on here, Howard. And you're dialed in as far as looking into contracts, knowing the insights, the ins, the outs, and then also talking with different agents around the league. And when you were coming on the show, you said, hey, I want to talk about this Budda Baker contract thing because you think you have some solutions potentially for the Arizona Cardinals and their star safety.
I don't think they're as complicated as some people have made it out to be, Bo. And that's one of the interesting things about this. And of course, we're going forward with the assumption of the reports is that one of the things was that he wanted to be, or at least his agent was pushing for him to be the highest paid safety in the NFL. Well, one reality is that he already, on the contract he signed 3 years ago, on average per year, is the 7th highest paid safety in the NFL. The highest paid guy is Derwin James, who signed, I believe it was last year, and he's making his average is a little over $4 million a year more than Budda Baker. That was on a more recent contract. One thing that's interesting is Budda's agent, David Mulugeta, represents 4 of the top 8 safeties in the NFL right now, and one of them is Derwin James. Now, I would think there'd be people who would say, well, no matter what, Doug Farrar says and doesn't even rate Budda Baker in the top 20 or anything like that, I think we all believe that Budda Baker's in the top group of safeties in the NFL, but I think a lot of people would agree, yeah, I might say Derwin James is up there a little bit higher than Budda Baker. Be that as it may, Mulugeta also represented Jesse Bates III, who signed in free agency this year with Atlanta, leaving the Bengals, on a 4-year deal that averages $16 million a year. That's an average of only $1.25 million more than Budda. And so obviously we don't know what the agent is trying to accomplish here, but it wouldn't take that much to move him up a few spots into that list of top safeties. And to me, it's pretty basic. And that is because he has 2 years left on his contract, no guaranteed money left. $13.1 million this year, $14.2 next year, non-guaranteed. So the first thing you do is just guarantee this year's salary. And if you want to keep it at 13.1, so be it. And the bottom line is if he's on the team, it becomes automatically guaranteed after the first week of the season. So that's the number one part of it. Then what you want to do is get him some immediate money, I would think. That's what they want. So what you do is, and he has a cap figure of about $16.9 million this year. Next year's cap is just under $18 million. Okay, so here's what you do. You give him the guaranteed money this year. Then next year you give a guaranteed option bonus that doesn't kick in until the beginning of the 2024 league year. And what that does is it only prorates starting next year. So you wouldn't add any cap figures to this year. You could give him a signing bonus this year, lower the base salary, and save some money against the salary cap. And who knows, give him a signing bonus, I don't know, 20, 25 million, whatever it might be, and then add a year to it at whatever salary they can agree to. And so you can increase the average per year. get him some guaranteed money in there. Maybe they want to add 2 more years to it after 2024. But if 2026 is not guaranteed, then you're not obviously committed to it. And so there's a way of playing with that signing bonus, that guaranteed signing bonus money, whether it's this year or you wait till next year. So you prorate that over the remaining years and you lower the base salary with some of that to guarantee it. And so that lowers the cap figure. And not only this year, perhaps next year, it gives them even more to spend next year. So I don't see this as that complicated a situation. Now, some are saying, well, then why don't they get it done? Why isn't he not signed by now? Well, these things still take time. The agent makes an offer, the team comes back, and then maybe the agents, well, why don't we do this? And they're playing with all these different numbers until you come up with an agreement. Obviously, I would think the deadline is training camp right now.
Yeah.
One thing you don't want is another hold-in, which you would probably guess that Budda Baker would do if there is not a new contract by the start of training camp. I believe they're on the same page, I would hope, and that they will get this done. And I think that those aspects of it that I mentioned are ways to do it without throwing your salary cap or throwing your budget, totally out the window.
Yeah, when you start to look at the breakdown or try to forecast, figure out what the team is doing and what the holdup potentially is. I mean, I think as far as this offseason went in what Monti Ossenfort was trying to accomplish and cleaning up, the mess left by his predecessors and getting this team set up to navigate in offseason how he wants to do it and how he views is going to be the most successful and maybe the most efficient way for a rebuild. I don't think he was prioritizing going back to the negotiating table with a guy that he has under control, at least for this season and beyond this season, right? In 2023 and having the team option in 2024. So once he got everything kind of cleared up and out of the way as far as accumulating assets, clearing salary space, figuring out what they were going to do with free agents and then getting the draft all done and then getting through all the OTAs and mini camp, now that it's like dead season, the roster is basically complete outside of 2-3 openings. I think that this is a perfect time for Monti Ossenfort to go to Budda Baker's representation and say, okay, how can we make Budda happy? Because obviously Monti outlined in his introductory press conference, his ideal football player is basically Budda Baker. He said pretty much that much, and it seems like there's some simple solutions that aren't going to take up too many guaranteed future dollars from this organization, put them at any risk as far as, being cap strung with money tied up in Budda Baker, he's in his prime years. I got to assume that there is a way that they could make Budda Baker happy with his deal, restructured a little bit and make him, feel respected enough to put back on the uniform and go do what he does best, and that's play football for the Arizona Cardinals.
No, I think you're 100% right. And there's been narrative put out there by some that, Monti Ossenfort in his first year as a general manager doesn't want to set a precedent and redo a guy with 2 years left on his contract. And what message does that send? Well, the bottom line on this team is who else? Is there anybody else that would be knocking on his door?
Right.
If he did that, there really isn't anybody else. And to me, the message you would be sending, and a positive one, is that, hey, we assume that Budda Baker wants to be here. We assume he wants to play here, even though he knows, as much as he wants to win, that this season might be a real slog for this football team.
Mm-hmm.
But just by having a guy that wants to be a part of it and wants to be a part of this new way of doing things, that's sending a message to all these young guys, all these players that they brought in on 1 and 2 year deals with heart. I mean, this team, Bo, spent somewhere around $27 million of guaranteed money in the offseason on 21 or 22 players. I mean, that's just crazy how little that is. Total of $15 million in signing bonuses. Zach Allen got that deal from Denver. He got a $15 million signing bonus and $32 million guaranteed. So they've watched that this year. And so what you're doing is you're sending a message to all these other guys who are going to be fighting for jobs that it doesn't mean you have to be Budda Baker, but you show that passion, you show that ability, and when the time comes, we will take care of you. And I think that's the key. And like you said, this is a perfect time for it. I mean, I know it's a different regime, but that's when the Kyler Murray deal got done last season. Certainly DJ Humphries didn't, and Marcus Golden didn't. And then they weren't practicing all that much during training camp. You want Budda Baker on the field, I believe, when training camp opens. And this is the type of guy, in my mind, I think everyone agrees, that you reward. You don't show disrespect. I think one of the untold parts of this a little bit is that we all watched Hard Knocks last year and saw that episode when his sister was there with him and they were talking about colleges to go to. And I'm fairly certain that his sister lives with him, and she chose Arizona State. Mm-hmm. So that could be in the back of the mind too. Hey, I want to be here. I want to finish what I started, even though it's, with new coaches and all those things. So as who was it? Was it Larry the Cable Guy? Is that the guy? Whatever he says, just get her done. Just get her done. I think they will, and everybody will be positive going into training camp, at least as positive as they can be.
I didn't know I was going to have Howard Balzer on the show quoting Larry the Cable Guy, but here we are. I see in the chat as well saying Monty is a dog. And you know what? Like, when you think about the end of Steve Keim's tenure as GM, and it's like, when you think about parents, right? You had your one parent that was laying down the law and it was doing the legit parenting. And sometimes anytime you would ask for things, they would say no, because, was it going to make sense for you as a child and your development, or were they just going to, or there was the parent that was the pushover, right? And that's, so in my household, it's dad, it's me, right? And Steve Keim was kind of the pushover. Like anything his players wanted, he kind of gave in, right? You had all the hold-ins in the training camp last year. You had everybody pounding the table. You got to go to the corner. So he goes to Vegas and he sends a 6th-round pick for Trayvon Mullen. You need an offensive lineman. He sends a 5th-round pick to Buffalo. The Cardinals need a move, so they just trade for Robbie Chosen Anderson for when nobody's willing to trade for him. And he was just kind of the pushover GM, where I think, when Monti Ossenfort got in the door as a first-year GM for the Arizona Cardinals, he was set the president, like, you're not going to take advantage of me like the predecessor here. Like, I am a guy that's going to be taken seriously. Like, you can negotiate with me. Like, I'm going to take care of my players, but you want the 3rd overall pick, you're going to have to give like what I view as, what it's going to take to get that. If you want to trade for DeAndre Hopkins, you're going to have to give me equal value or better value. And he's proven so far that he's going to dig in, and he's not going to give what he doesn't think is fair return. So, I think good GMs can ride that fine line of, taking care of their players, making smart business moves, but also not being a pushover.
Well, I think in some fairness, obviously going into this year, there's not a whole lot of expectations for this team.
Sure.
So you have a new GM, a new head coach.
Completely fair.
And you can kind of say, okay, this is the way we're going to do it, no matter what anybody says. Last year was a little different. I mean, this was a team that was talking Super Bowl. Hey, can we be the 3rd team that will play the Super Bowl in our home stadium? Even with the very difficult finish to 2021, there was still that feeling that this was still a good football team. And so then you start, most of those trades, even the Marquise Brown trade, that was in direct correlation to DeAndre Hopkins' suspension coming up. Who knows how ugly those first 6 games of the year would have been if they hadn't made that deal for Brown, when, of course, they could have had the center of the future in Tyler Linderbaum. But a lot of those deals, I think, were basically done because you were trying to get this thing together. Cody Ford was, signed because Justin Pugh was having more injuries, and all of a sudden they wanted depth. And what happened then? He got hurt. And so, and then Rodney Hudson, you're convincing him and hoping that he will come back. And then what happens? He gets injured and can't play after the 4th game of the year. So a lot of the moves were necessitated by injuries in trying to keep this team at least to be competitive. And obviously it didn't work because the injuries just kept mounting and mounting and mounting. And now it's a start over in effect. So I can understand a lot of them didn't work out, obviously, but a lot of those were done, I think, because of that feeling that this team could do some really good things next year. And if you don't make moves, then everyone's going to be saying, well, holy, you're not doing anything. You lost this guy. You lost that guy. What are you doing? And so it's tough to do anything that works once the season starts. Hey, the year before, you can say, hey, look what he did. They went and traded for Zach Ertz after Max Williams got hurt. That turned out to be obviously, a pretty good move. And he helped salvage, a lot of things for that 21 season. So, like I said, so much was just out of everyone's control last year.
Right.
And certainly it's led to where we are right now.
Marcus, FBI agent Monti. Yeah, obviously, he was asked about that in his press conference that was going to be his career path if he didn't get into football. Fishbowl Flash, Monti, the Cardinal on Wall Street. Yeah, he's savvy out there. He's smooth negotiator and making all the right moves. Michael Evans saying 5 wins. Look, it's obviously not a team with Super Bowl aspirations, contending for a playoff spot. Probably not in 2023. But obviously a team with a direction and a path, and you have to appreciate that Monti Ossenfort is out there executing what he believes is the best path to finding consistent success for this organization. Speaking of consistent success for the last 25 years, #1 brewery in the state of Arizona has been Four Peaks, and it continues to be and will be for a long time to come, because they got these great things going on. Like I saw this at Four Peaks Brew on Instagram. They've got this specially brewery dinner pairing event, and it's going to be going on with the wonderful folks at the Arizona Biltmore. Moving on up, they're with the highfalutin folks over the Arizona Biltmore. They got the indulge in the delicious beer and dinner pairing experience, where each dish is specifically crafted to perfectly complement their craft beers. It sounds like an incredible event. You can find out more about it. Follow them at Four Peaks Brew on IG. They've got, giveaways that they're doing, contests. You can win DVAX tickets. You can help teachers who are during their off season. You can give $1,000 to help support their school year that's coming up at the end of the summer. Four Peaks is doing everything. They're entrenched in the community, just like PHNX Sports, and that's where we're proud to be partnered with them. Right now, you can go to, of course, any game at Chase Field, hang out at the Four Peaks tap room out there in right field. They got the Rattle On Red Ale up there. It's smooth as Corbin Carroll's swing. Check out all their beers that they brew out there. Kilt Lifter, of course, their flagship, the Wow Wheat. So many different, different beers that they have, including your IPAs. Check out at Four Peaks Brew and at Four Peaks Pub on your socials. Keep up with the latest on Arizona's hometown brewery. You got to be 21 years or older to drink Four Peaks, and you got to drink it responsibly. I was hanging out at studio all day, Howard. Got a little hungry, and thanks to our friends over at Mountain Mike's, no hunger pangs for me. I was enjoying some nice pizza lunch from our friends over at Mountain Mike's. I believe it was Canadian bacon. That was a delicious tasting pie. Also, they just got the small pepperonis. Can't go wrong with that. And of course, if you can fortunate enough to get out of the off campus for lunch, go check out their lunchtime buffet. It's elite. Whether you're in Mesa, Chandler, Tucson, go check out that lunch buffet. Thank them for the food because it's delicious. Head over to mountainmikespizza.com. Kids, my son's turning 2 today. I'm getting some Mountain Mikes for my son for his little get together we're going to have. Happy birthday, my son Gray. We love you. We're going to have a pizza party. We're going to hang out by the pool. Can't wait to do so. Thanks to Mountain Mike's. Mesa, Chandler, Tucson. Place your order. And, of course, if you're a diehard, you get a $50 voucher upon signing up. Can't beat that. Howard, you're out there in the East Valley. You've got to have had some Mountain Mike's in your day.
I haven't yet. So now that you just made me hungry by talking about it. So I definitely we'll have to check it out. I'm a New York pizza guy, but my wife's a Chicago pizza person. So we eat a lot of different ones. So I'll definitely have to check out Mountain Mike's.
Well, Eris is enjoying your insight, especially on the Budda Baker contract situation. It really does feel like there can be some common ground there. We talked, you and I were out there on the practice field taking in mini camp, and Monti Ossenfort came by a couple times, and it seems like he's close to vacation as they have this downtime. I wouldn't be surprised to see, some sort of restructuring report come out between now and training camp. It just seems like it would be a good solution for these two sides.
No doubt. I guess I'll go on the record and say I'll be surprised if it doesn't happen. And even though it is vacation time, like you said, there are still cell phones and still ways to communicate. So I'm sure there'll probably be some discussions going on. probably won't get totally serious until the last week or so before camp, because as we know, in a lot of these things, deadlines are what normally get things accomplished. So, just circle that date of July 27th when the veterans report, which, like I mentioned, 5 weeks from tomorrow. And I like I said, I'll be surprised if they don't get this accomplished in this time between now and then.
Now, this might be me getting greedy here because you put you on the record to say that. Can I put you on the record to make another prediction?
Well, I'll try. My predictions aren't very good. I was joking to someone the other day. A lot of people know that I put together Lindy's Pro Football Magazine, and I mentioned someone the other day. I've been doing that. This is my 31st magazine that I've done, and in the 30 previous years, I've yet to pick the Super Bowl team. So, predictions, of course, you're doing it in May, but I don't know if you do it in May or September. But so yeah, I'll always make some predictions. Doesn't mean they'll be right though.
All right, I'm going to shoot on this one anyways. So if they don't iron out some sort of restructure contract solution between now and training camp, you think that Budda Baker's out there practicing with his teammates, or do you think he's going to pull off continue to hold in?
I would say he would continue to hold in, and I'd be surprised if there's another thing. I'd be surprised if he doesn't, because that's the one thing you don't want to do. We see it around the NFL. It's not as if the Cardinals were the only team it happened to last summer, but it's not a great look when the guy isn't out there and the team is having to come up with different different explanations. I mean, the DJ Humphrey one was classic last year with Humphreys when they said he had a stomach virus, and yet he's out there every day standing among his teammates and all that. And then all of a sudden they sign him to a new deal, and miraculously the stomach virus went away and he was on the field the next day. So it's something that you want Baker out there, and I think that the organization understands that. But hey, it still takes two sides to make a deal, and we don't know how strident the agent and Budda are about quote being. I don't think the Cardinals are going to go to $19 million a year or a little. We know that when Kyler Murray signed last year, he got whatever it was, $1 million more in the total that Deshaun Watson got. I don't think we're going to see that with Budda Baker. But I might be surprised that if it would happen. But again, you don't have to be right at the top to make a guy happy. And I think as long as the Cardinals do that in good faith, that this will get done.
Marcus saying Monti going to make NFL owners jealous. A lot of them saying, why can't we find a GM like Ossenfort? Feels surreal to have a competent management of their professional football team here in the desert. Absolutely. And then thank you, Fishbowl Flash and Mr. J, for the happy birthday wishes for my son. So we talk about the expectations for the Arizona Cardinals this year, and NFL Network, their Good Morning Football crew, put together kind of these tiers. And this is their Instagram. So this is the NFC tiers, Howard, that they have. One, they have your championship contenders, I would assume. It's Philadelphia and San Francisco. Next, you have the Dallas Cowboys, Minnesota Vikings, Seattle Seahawks, and the Giants. Probably your playoff teams or teams that are poised to maybe make a run deep in the playoffs. And then your fringe playoff teams, like the Detroit Lions, the LA Rams, if everything goes well with their stars, and if Stafford's healthy and Cooper Kupp's healthy, and then the New Orleans Saints with Derek Carr. And then you have this fourth tier. It's like, we'll see, probably not their year. The Atlanta Falcons, Carolina Panthers, Chicago Bears, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Green Bay Packers, and Washington Commanders. And then that's it. That's the NFC tiers. Like, so I mentioned all the teams, except for the Arizona Cardinals. They didn't even have the Cardinals logo on this tier list at all. They completely omitted the Arizona Cardinals. Then I looked to their Twitter, and they had the same list. So it's the big dogs, the Eagles and Niners, the hovering close to the big dog status, Cowboys, Vikings, Seahawks, Giants. TBD is Lions, Saints, Rams. And then shock the world, they have the same Commanders, Packers, Bears, Bucks, Panthers, Falcons. And then you realize, like, once I think they realized they effed up, they put the Cardinals at the bottom. And it's like, oh, hey, the Cardinals here are at the shock the world tier. I mean, just absolutely, like, when you're looking for signs of disrespect, even for a rebuilding team, this is about as bad as it gets.
I just wonder if they ran out of space. Who knows? It looked like on both those graphics there was no space for another logo on the first one, and then
I'm not like the graphics god here, but here's the thing: you can resize it. You can resize it to fit all the teams. I mean, there's 30 teams in the league. What is it? 14 in the NFC and 16 in the AFC. I might have flipped that. I can't remember, but I mean, what are we doing here? I'm sorry, 15 in each side. I mean, what are we doing?
No, it is 16. But the thing down the bottom, I'm surprised they didn't put Cardinals shock the galaxy and then they shocking the world. But yeah, it was certainly this team isn't getting a whole lot of respect. This team is kind of I think understanding that to a degree, but accepting it and saying, hey, we'll be happy shocking the world. Are they really? And what do they have to do to shock the world? I mean, heck, I think if they won 5 or 6 games, that would probably shock the world. So, who knows? Crazy things can happen. I remember, I forget the season, Bo, maybe 5-6 years ago when Todd Bowles, although it might have even been longer, a lot of times I always have a rule of thumb. If you think something was 3 years ago, it was really like double that.
Right.
It was a lot longer than you think. But Todd Bowles was the head coach of the Jets. And universally, there were people saying they won't win a game. That roster is just horrible. They don't have a chance of winning a game. And they went out and won 5 somehow. And they played competitive, solid football. And so who knows? Maybe a lot of things would have to go right, obviously, for that to happen. And it's a very difficult schedule that the Cardinals have. I mean, one of the things that I do in Lindy's is the one thing I hate to a degree are these strength of schedule stories that people put out. Because all they do is they add up the records of everybody on the schedule. And then someone will look at it and say, well, why does this team have a hard schedule when they were last in the division? Well, because you're taking into account the 3 teams that are ahead of them in the division, and you play them a total of 6 times. And so what I do is I break it down. And the Cardinals have clearly, by far, and this is the whole division, has the hardest schedule in almost half the games. Of the 8 non-division games, the NFC West plays teams that won almost 61% of their games last year. That's how tough it is. The next team, number 2, their next division is the AFC East at 58%. That's why a lot of people are saying, hey, everyone's saying, oh, the Jets are going to make the playoffs with Aaron Rodgers, but that division has a really tough schedule, and it would be very unlikely that all the teams would make the playoffs. So who knows how it'll play out? But after that, it goes all the way down to 52% for the AFC West, and there's 3 teams that are under 500 with those 8 non-division games. And so that's going to be tough on the whole division, but certainly difficult, on the Cardinals. And so the other 3 games besides the division games, well, they're playing 4th place teams in the division, in the divisions that they're playing. So those could be games that you can argue, hey, maybe those are games they can steal. So we'll see. But I think one thing we will see is a team that goes out there and just competes. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to win those close games. And they lost a bunch of close games last year. It's going to be even harder to win those close games this year because of the quality of teams that they're playing.
Yeah, the only time we didn't see at least one team that was really projected or predicted to play horribly. Like normally, like when they're predicting teams to be like last year, Seattle was one of the teams that people said just write them off. They're going to be terrible. They're rebuilding. They got rid of Russell Wilson, and they're going to lean on Geno Smith at least for the time being, and maybe Drew Lock will push for playing time there. And they completely shocked the world. But the only time it didn't work out, I remember when Jacksonville was picking 1 and the Jets were picking 2. Normally, you see those teams that pick 1, 2 show significant, at least improvement the following year because they're picking at the top of the draft. They usually have decent cap space, but the Jets and Jags were horrible. But normally, like there are a lot of, especially in the NFL, it happens more often than the other professional sports leagues. Is like you will see a team that goes from the outhouse to the penthouse or close to it and contends for a playoff spot. And that's what's great about the NFL. And that's why, fan bases don't give up hope completely. But look, to say the Arizona Cardinals aren't, undermanned and their roster isn't, kind of not to to at least on par with the rest of the league, I think it would be a bit naive. I think that they absolutely have their challenges. What would really they have to do to compete and really change people's opinions is if the coaching staff really has this team ready to play and can kind of win that game of chess against their opponent, and win games against teams that, that they're close to roster wise. Like I know, like, I'm not going to sit here and predict that they're going to upset, the San Francisco 49ers, but them taking on Washington Commanders week 1, or the game that they're going to play against the Houston Texans, I think that those are games that they could certainly win and surprise a lot of people by just adding victories against opponents with similar roster builds.
No, I think you're right. And I think when we look at this, we know that a lot of things have to go right for that to happen. Health, obviously, starting out as number one, and NFL games, NFL teams win in the trenches. That is something that will never change. I think it's forgotten sometimes during the year when a team is either struggling or doing whatever, and everyone points to the quarterback or points to the play caller or whatever it might be, when the real issues are either on the offensive or defensive line. And that's right now where the Cardinals have a lot of questions. I mean, yes, we expect Paris Johnson Jr. to play somewhere, but he will be a rookie. We've seen rookies come into this league and play well. Where will he play? Is it left guard? Is it right tackle? If it's right tackle, who will be the left guard? Who will be the center? And that line has to play well.
Well, and on the other side, I mean, name their defensive line right now. I mean,
exactly.
Some of the guys who are going to vie for it, Rashard Lawrence, I think Carlos Watkins is in that conversation, Ben Stilley. Like, these are all pretty unproven players. And like, if the offensive line works out, but on the other side, the defensive line, there's not enough beef there to help, set up this new linebacking core and pass rushing unit. Like, it's really going to be a long season. So, and there's so many question marks, to your point. Like, a lot has to go right. Like, I think there's a lot of confidence in this coaching staff, and I think there's some intriguing players, but like, it's not all going to go right. Like right now, it's like, this is the easy, just like it's pajama ball, according to JG. Everybody looks good in shorts, right? At this point, we don't really know what this roster is made of and where it lacks and where its strengths are. So,
and remember, it's not only pajama ball and shorts, but you're also playing against yourself.
Right.
And so that can skew some feelings also. And so, I understand people saying, oh man, I like what Austin Ford has done. And all of a sudden they're almost ready to anoint the guy. And I'm not saying it's not going to work out, but, let's tap the brakes a little bit until we see this, all play out. And hopefully it will work out. It definitely looks like a professional operation that they have. But as I've always said, Bo, I mean, people should realize it's hard to win a game in the NFL. This is a hard league to be good in on a consistent basis. And so many things have to go right. And I alluded to it earlier when we were talking about the running game. I mean, your top 3 receivers coming back are all 5'9" or less. So you're hoping that Zach Pascal can contribute. You're hoping that the rookie Michael Wilson and he looks like he can be a pretty good player. But can you expect that and count on that from a rookie? And who knows what it's going to look like for however many games we assume that Colt McCoy will have to play. And I know people are calling, oh, why not put Clayton Tune out there and let's see what happens. Well, I don't know if that's something you want to do with a rookie 5th round pick right out of the box. So,
right.
We'll see. It's going to be fascinating to watch, but I think everybody has to remember all these things that we're saying now and not forget about them when the season begins and maybe they start losing some games. I like to call that collective amnesia, and we'll see if too many people get afflicted by that if it isn't working out, especially early in the season.
Eris is saying he's okay with 4 wins this season as long as they are competitive in each and every game. Marcus is saying 6 wins in his humble opinion. Sports media putting out fake news. Just kidding. Victor saying, I honestly think we're better. We're going to be a lot better than people think. I really, based off coaching, and Monti will squeeze out 6 wins. Agent 47. We have a lot of young players, so it's hard to see where we'll be standing at the end of the year. Ray says 4 wins at the end of the season or this season. And then Vic saying hot takes because it's what, 101? Is that the temperature? Is that what we're talking about? Yeah.
Maybe probably even hotter than that.
Right.
It's going to get hotter.
Right. Hot takes, hot deals right now. PHNXlocker.com. Also, find out and become a diehard today. We got the Knockout Nights Cornhole Tournament going to be fired back up at the beginning of July. You don't want to miss out on the first Friday. It's going on through August. We got our squads out there competing in the heat out there on the Great Lawn, of course, where we're going to invade during each and every football Sunday this year before Cardinals games, home and away. But free to enter the Knockout Nights Cornhole Tournament. Diamondbacks takeovers. We've got a few more of those coming up. Of course, you got the pregame meetup, Four Peaks Draft House at Chase Field. Save some money on those, but becoming a diehard, you get access to the entire website, all the content, including all the great articles that Howard's writing and churning out at gophnx.com. Plus, you get to get into our Discord. So you love the chat here during the shows. You can continue that chat in the Discord, talking Cardinals football with myself, Johnny. Got to become a member to do that. You receive that exclusive content, discounts on all events, and you get discounts on merchandise as well. Become a diehard. Get in the Discord chats. Don't miss out on any of the Cardinals talk or anything going on with the Suns, Coyotes, D-backs, Sun Devils, Wildcats. Whatever you're into, you can join the chat today. Just got to become a diehard. Find out more. Go PHNX.com. Make sure you're following Howard on Twitter at HBalzer. What's the number attached to that? 72, I believe, right? HBalzer 72?
721.
721. I apologize. HBalzer 721. Howard, thanks for joining us today. Got more work coming everybody's way. Go PHNX.com, including some of the discussion we had about Budda Baker. Can't wait for that. Expect Johnny Venerable to be back on the show tomorrow if the move went all well and good, and he's got probably better internet just because he's out of Maricopa, one would just assume. So we're excited to see that and have our guy JV back on the program. In the meantime, subscribe to PHNX Sports here on YouTube. Make sure you're set up for alerts anytime we go live, especially with breaking news. You don't want to miss out on that. And like this video, had a great time hanging out with our guy Howard. I'm Bo Brock. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. We'll talk to you on a Thursday edition of PHNX Cardinals.